Hi there and welcome to The Perspective on Berita Satu English. I'm with Stanley Harsha, veteran US diplomat and author of Like the Sun and the Moon, the new book about his life in Indonesia and about the United States and the relationship between the two. You've got two versions of this, Seperti Bulan dan Matahari, the Indonesian version, and the English version. What's the story?
Well, exactly. Well, because I can write in English but not write in Indonesian. So the book was written in Indonesian, in English, but the publisher is a local publisher in Indonesia. It's Kompas Publishing. Mm-hmm. And so the book was written for primarily for Indonesians. And so my wife actually, who's very good with words and language and so forth, she went to University of Michigan. She translated the entire book herself. And but I published it in both languages because it was written in English and translated.
So how did it come about? What led you to write it?
A very old friend of mine, who's one of the executives with Kompas Publishing, we were at his house one Sunday, and he asked me to write a book about my experiences in Indonesia. He thought it would be interesting for the readers, and he wanted to be kind of a light book, just short anecdotes. He didn't really expect me to follow through, but I was excited about it, and I started writing the book immediately. And of course, in the book, I covered a lot more serious topics rather than just light stories, because I had some messages I wanted to convey about religious tolerance, about understanding of Islam, about respect for human rights, about human trafficking, corruption, and some issues that I thought were important to get out there for both the Indonesians and the Americans and non-Indonesians to understand.
Well, they all come through. It reads sort of very smoothly, almost like a memoir. Very easy for people just to kind of access. But there's a bit of your life story in there as well. How did you come to now? What is your story with Indonesia?
Well, you know, to me it kind of feels like Indonesian, they say jodoh, which is kind of like something that's fated to happen in a positive way. And it almost feels that way because when I first joined the Foreign Service, there was all these countries that were offered, and I thought about it overnight. I had one day to think about it, and I did a little bit more research about Indonesia, and I decided this was the most exciting, interesting country that I could possibly go to. And I asked to go there, and of all the 30 of us who came as new diplomats, I was sent to Indonesia. And then throughout my career, without even being asked to do so, the Foreign Service, the State Department, kept asking me to come back to Indonesia. And so that's why I spent more than 12 years here of my career.
And how many ambassadors have you worked with? There's a number that you mentioned in the book.
I'd have to count again, but I think I worked for 5 ambassadors.
5 ambassadors?
Yeah.
You've seen, you've been a witness to all the changes that Indonesia has gone through, but the sort of first core message that stuck out for me from this book was, as you reflect in the title, like the moon and the sun, meaning they go together, meaning Indonesia and the United States. Mm-hmm. And so there's seems to me the clear narrative of showing the commonalities between the two, but also the areas of conflict. Probably the biggest one being post-2001, post-September 11th, and the war on terror. What do you seek to achieve among the public in terms of how you cover that in this book?
Okay, well, you know, before September 11th and before President Bush, America was overwhelmingly popular. In Indonesia, Americans were, like popularity of over 70%, during a time of peace and assistance and under the Clinton administration, and it plummeted under President Bush. So when I convey in this book, I want to convey an honest reflection of what happened from my viewpoint, which is that the United States went overboard in the war against terrorism. Okay. And we were asking the entire Muslim world to support us. At the same time, we were saying either you're with us or you're against us. We were invading 2 Muslim countries, and we were using the word Islam and terrorism, President Bush and his officials, the word Islam and terrorism in the same sentences, and talking about things like Islamic fascism. Those are the words of President Bush. So while we sought to seek the support and the hearts and minds of the Muslim world, including Indonesians, in fact, we were scaring the Muslim world. At that time, over 80% of the Indonesian public was afraid that the United States was going to attack Indonesia. And this was like around 2003. I mean, that's an astounding number. If you think about that, how the type of words we use and the actions we took, how actually made it more difficult for us to fight terrorism.
You compare, there's two things actually that jump out at me. First was actually the CIA. You say the role of the CIA is given sort of a huge estimation in the Indonesian mindset. Do you think that's true?
Well, yeah, it's very true. I mean, okay, so Indonesians, the entire Indonesian public, from intellectuals all the way to the grassroots, will have an exaggerated perception of the power and the influence of the United States. And associating everything that's sort of secretive or that the United States does with the CIA. And it's really highly exaggerated. Of course, historically, there are some reasons for that. The CIA supported a separatist movement in the 1950s that tried Sumatra to separate from Indonesia. In 1965, with the massacres and the coup and so forth, the CIA, the State Department, not necessarily the CIA, the State Department provided the names of communists to the Indonesian government. So there has been some instances of the United States intervening in Indonesia. But yeah, there were conspiracy theories after September 11th that a lot of people believed that the CIA, working in conjunction with Israel, was behind the attacks at the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and also after the Bali bombing. Mm-hmm. That myth persisted until after the Bali bombing, and then a lot of Indonesians realized that terrorism really was a real threat, with Indonesians being involved in terrorism. However, I would say that those myths still persist, that there's still a percentage of Indonesians that still believe that the United States was behind all the terrorist attacks.
Another comparison you make, which we will come back to, we'll stay on terrorism, was between President Obama, and you already mentioned President Bush using the term Islamic fascism. You compare it to another speech by President Obama in which he does not use the word Islam in an entire speech about security affairs. Do you think there is the possibility that Indonesia will continue to have a more positive view of the United States as this young generation sort of metastasizes and becomes the new leaders? Do you think that's going to hold, or do you think the damage is already done?
No, I mean, the damage is not done at all. I mean, Indonesians are very tolerant, respectful people, okay? So they don't hold historical grudges against other people, other countries, and they particularly do not blame the citizens or the societies for things. They really look at the countries themselves. So we have a new president, Obama, who totally changed the whole scenario, the whole message, the whole perspective, and genuinely so, because he's spent some of his childhood in Indonesia. He understands the world. He understands Islam, and he has respect and the ability to reach out to other countries, even enemies. By reaching out to enemies, he's brought peace. And so, a really, really important thing is you look at every single speech that President Obama gave about terrorism. He never talked about Islam in the same speech when he talked about terrorism. Okay, when he spoke about Islam, he never mentioned terrorism. A very, very important distinction, because in order to be successful in the war against terrorism, we need to totally de-link terrorism from religion, that the two have nothing to do with each other. So I think that the generation now that has seen the attitude of President Obama, they will continue to have a better viewpoint of the United States. The Palestine-Israeli conflict will continue to damage the U.S. image in the Muslim world until that's been resolved, because the United States is associated with supporting Israel. In the future, I think it's important to know that public attitudes can change very quickly. So if we have another president, another policy, that we do something that Indonesians do not like, then the relationships could turn bad very, very quickly, and that's just natural. So you should not overestimate how strong our friendship is, because Indonesia is a very sovereign, proud country, and Indonesians will express their displeasure very quickly.
We've got to go to break, but we'll be right back with Stanley Harsha speaking about Indonesia and the United States.